I'll call the meeting back to order. Welcome back to the Standing Committee on National Security and Defence as we continue our look at threats to Canada, specifically terrorism. Joining us to discuss the issue of threats to Canada is Mr. Tarek Fatah. Welcome. Mr. Fatah is the founder of the Muslim Canadian Congress, which was formed in the wake of 9/11 as a response to give members of the Muslim community, Canadian community a voice, especially when it came to issues of human rights and secular values. The Muslim Canadian Congress has been prominent in speaking out against the mixing of politics and religion and on issues of gender equality. Mr. Fatah writes a weekly column for the Toronto Sun, hosts a program on AM Newstalk 1010 in Toronto on Sunday afternoons with one of the widest listening audiences in the Greater Toronto Area. In 2008, Fatah published his first book entitled The Tragic Illusion of an Islamic State that was runners-up for the prestigious Donor Prize. This was followed by his book entitled The Jew Is Not My Enemy in 2010 that won the Helen and Stan Vine Award for nonfiction on current affairs. Mr. Fatah, welcome to the committee. We're pleased to have you here. I understand that you have an opening statement, and I would invite you to begin.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Senators, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to address an issue that not only concerns Canada, but the rest of the world, but above all, the community of my faith that seems to be lost in the sands of Sinai with no Moses to lead us out. No matter how we couch our words in the language of political correctness or postmodernism, the fact of the matter is that Western civilization today faces a transcontinental challenge to its very existence. It's not as if we have not faced this challenge before. In the Second World War, in 4 years, we and our allies defeated the largest armies the world had ever seen and saved the world from Hitler and Nazis at a cost of over 30 million people. Subsequently, we won the Cold War. But today, 14 years after Islamism launched its war in the West, we cannot stall, let alone defeat the forces of international jihad. As a Muslim, it gives me no pleasure in washing my dirty laundry, either in public or in these august chambers. But I believe if we Muslims do not step forward and speak the truth, we will suffocate in the stench of our own making while trying to blame others for creating the mess we find ourselves firmly stuck. I understand the Standing Committee on the National Security and Defence has a mandate to study and report on security threats facing Canada and is presently focusing on the issue of preventing of radicalization. Allow me to answer some specific areas that may be of help to your committee and offer some recommendations at the end. Number one, the problem in my community or in the Muslim community. The problem of radicalization in the Muslim community depends in which Muslim community we are talking about. If we are speaking about Muslim Kurds or Muslim Baloch or the Muslim Darfuris, the problem is non-existent. The same can be said of most Iranian Muslims. However, within the white and black converts to Islam, the Somali, Bangladeshi and Arab Muslim communities, and more specifically the Pakistani Canadian Muslim community, the problem of radicalization is very widespread. It's deeply entrenched, embedded, and that is framed in terms of an Islam versus the infidel scenario leading up to an end of time Armageddon. Number two, the support infrastructure for terrorism and radicalization. The support structure that exists for Islam-based terrorism or radicalization or Islamism, which is a starting point to the end path of someone being a jihadist, is multifaceted. At its base are the Islamist organizations and mosque-based groups who lay the seeds of radicalization, not necessarily in the recruitment of terrorists, but in the politicization of the sermons that whip up a sense of victimhood of Muslims while cultivating a hatred of non-Muslims and other groups such as gays and women who demand equality and who refuse to wear head wraps or be encased in burqas. To give you a specific example, which most of you would not know about, is that most mosques in Canada and around the world start their Friday congregation with a prayer that asks Allah to give victory to the Muslims over the kuffar or the infidels, that is people like you. The glorification and radicalization is endemic and ubiquitous in the sermons and teachings to very young adults, as can be verified from the incidents in the United Kingdom and even here in Canada. Every Islamic hero in the last 1400 years has been a jihadist who is celebrated for his, there are no her, his exploits in defeating Christians, Jews, Hindus, or pagans. It is with shock that I learnt on Saturday that an RCMP de-radicalization partner, a white convert to Islam by the name of Muhammad Robert Heft, had lengthy meetings over the last 2 weeks with the Taliban leadership in the ISIS-backing Emirate of Qatar. Mr. Heft has been negotiating a pact with the Taliban, and I am not sure if either your committee or RCMP or CSIS knows about it. But he did come back yesterday and attended an event in Mississauga, which was also, the keynote speaker was a federal minister, where he expounded his views. His view is that Canada's foreign policy is at the root cause of all jihadi terrorism. His absurd suggestion is that to ally with the Taliban terrorists and to fight ISIS. The question has been asked if the RCMP or CSIS have ever had any communications with that group. In my 25 years of fighting against Islamism and confronting jihadism within my Muslim community, as an author of 2 books, as a radio host, as a weekly columnist, let me state emphatically, not a single time have I ever been approached by any outreach committee of the Toronto Police, the RCMP, CSIS, or any other security agency. They will simply not meet with any Muslim who looks like an integrated Muslim. I can only draw one conclusion, ladies and gentlemen. In the eyes of the RCMP, a Muslim is a Muslim only if he or she dresses up in medieval attire, encases his wife in a burqa, and speaks with a guttural accent. The Muslims who the Mounties certify as moderate Muslims, who we are told are fighting radicalization, are in fact Islamists who are pro-Sharia, have never, ever once renounced the doctrine of armed jihad. These men and women are pulling the wool over RCMP eyes. As an example, one celebrity promoted by both CSIS and RCMP through both liberal and conservative governments is a Hamilton lawyer, a fine fellow by the name of Hussein Hamdani, who sits on the Canada's Cross-Cultural Roundtable on Security. His presence on CCR has been used to push the Islamist agenda rather than thwart the Islamists. Then there's the infamous Canadian Counter-Radicalization Handbook, United Against Terrorism, which was produced by 2 Muslim groups, ostensibly in collaboration with the RCMP, until they backed out later. The Mounties distanced themselves from this Canadian handbook, but it is instructive in who these Islamist groups in this booklet recommended as the most reliable of North America's counter-radicalization religious advisors. They include Ingrid Mattison, former president of ISNA, an organization which was an unindicted co-conspirator in the 2008 Texas terror trial. Ms. Mattison is a white convert to Islam, once proudly represented the Afghan Mujahideen government at the UN. We have Jamal Badawi. He sat on the board of another organization listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Texas terror trial. Siraj Wahaj, labeled as an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 WTC bombings. Ziad Shakir, who was outed for his radical ideology by a retired lieutenant commander in the US Navy, Dr. Zudi Jasser, the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Now, the question is asked whether counter-radicalization programs work. Let me assure you, there is no such thing as de-radicalization. It is one of the biggest money-making ventures that were ever introduced after 9/11. Experience in Saudi Arabia shows that every one of the radicals released under the guarantee of the Saudi government from Gitmo turned back and are now fighting on the side of ISIS. Let me give you an example of what Islamism is. Islamism is like an agricultural enterprise. Tilling the soil is different from planting and sowing the seed. Irrigating the soil is not the same as spreading pesticides to keep the parasites away. And when it comes to harvesting the crop, the act is different than the sale of the crop. Dear Senators, some Islamists plant the seed while others harvest the crop of jihadists as recruiters. To suggest that those who plant the seed should eradicate the crop before the harvest is a fool's dream. The RCMP and other guilt-ridden mainstream politicians may munch on this marijuana, but as a Muslim, I am prohibited from any intake of such intoxicants. The specific recommendations to this committee, I'll list them for you. Number one, lay hate speech charges against any Muslim cleric who hides behind religious rights to attack and demonizes members of another faith or another religion, as is done every Friday in every mosque of this country. Every mosque must be monitored for such hate speech, where the word kuffar is invoked to hide the real target, which is Hindus, Christians, and Jews. Any mosque indulging in active politics must have the charitable status revoked. We have the law, we simply don't implement it. Donations of more than $20 at all religious institutions must be made by check or credit card to cut off possibility of money laundering, which I have witnessed. Number 5, immigration from Pakistan, Somalia, Iran, Iraq, and Syria must be suspended until Canada can be assured that the security documents, identity papers, and university degrees cannot be bought in the black market or from state agencies. I am aware of how in Pakistan and Somalia and in Iran, someone named, for example, as Tarek Fatah could overnight become Abdul Khan or Behrouz Hamadan with documents and degrees to cheat the best of sleuths because the documents would be genuine, not forged. Identify Muslim groups who are hostile to Islamists and enable them to fight Islamism. In Canada, from the sowing of the seed to the harvesting of the crop, over here I mean Canadian Kurds, the Baloch, the African Darfuris, and the victims of Iran's relentless atrocities on its citizens. As one measure, Canada should re-examine the false designation of the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party, as a terrorist group, which we have done at the insistence of Turkey, which, by the way, is the main funder and supporter of ISIS, which PKK is the only group fighting ISIS. Had it not been for the PKK and the Syrian Kurdish counterpart, the YPJ, a human slaughter of immense proportions would have taken place on Sinjar Mountain, and Kobani would have fallen to ISIS. It is unfathomable to me that we would be allies with Turkey and Qatar, who funded, if not created ISIS, but that we treat PKK as terrorists when that group has saved tens of thousands of lives and did not flee like the American-supplied Iraqi army. Senators, in the Second World War, we were allies with Stalin because we had to destroy Hitler. Today, the people who fight on our behalf have been designated as terrorists, and the people who wish to destroy us are members of NATO. I will suggest my final recommendation, which might seem very trivial, but is extremely significant in what message we send out. We should ban the burqa in public as an example set by the Republic of France, and that has been upheld by the European Human Rights Commission and the court for two reasons. The robbery that took place of $500,000 of jewelry in Toronto last week could very well have been a terrorist attack by men wearing burqas, which has happened. Number two, by saying that we as Canadians refuse and reject a value that suggests that women are the source of all sin and therefore should be restricted in their home, we will send a clear message that if you wish to wear a burqa, you're free to wear it in your home. But on our streets, we would not like our children to be scared of people who wear clothes that literally frighten infants. Thank you very much.
Colleagues. Senator Stuart Olson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your frankness in your discussions on this. I wanted to understand from you the support infrastructure that you believe is here within the country, and I'm wondering if you could give me just briefly what is the support infrastructure here in groups.
The way you look at it, Senator, is not how the world works in the realm of Islamism. We don't need a structure. Many of the things that I have pointed out are generated in the minds of infants, of 5-year-old boys who are dressed up as medieval invaders of Europe. My name, Tarek, is a name given to me because of the general who invaded Spain in the year 711. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't need the infrastructure that you are looking for. What is happening is that the ideology of Islamism has escaped attention from everyone, from President Bush right down to President Obama and Prime Minister Cameron. In all of the Western world and the OECD countries, only one popular politician has had the courage to say in so many words that Islamism is a great threat, and that is our Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. No one else has had the guts, the ability to say that we are fighting an enemy that is structured around a death cult of a fascist ideology that considers Earth to be a transit lounge to the final destination where life will begin after death in paradise. And to most people in the West, this seems like a joke. To every Muslim, that is a fact of life.
Thank you. And I would just like you to repeat a part of your message, which is that it's not all Muslims. It is that I think that's very, very important in today's world.
Let me clarify.
Yeah.
I have repeated that for 14 years. Not just me, you and every Western politician has been, in cricketing terms, batting with on the back foot. We have seen the results. We have dead Canadians on our hand, and we have Toronto 18, the Digi bomber, the VRL bombers, and we all come back to the defensive notion. Of course not all Germans were Nazis. But did we sit around conference room during the Second World War saying, oh, what happens if a German got upset? I am suggesting to you that 14 years is long enough for not a single mosque imam to say, I renounce the doctrine of jihad. What would it take for someone to say, in this day and age, the doctrine of armed jihad is inapplicable, inadmissible, and we live as nation states. We do not have communities based on inherited race or religion. Our citizenship is based on human-created laws that can be changed by subsequent generations, not divine text sent by messengers that are immutable for all times.
Thank you, sir.
Senator White.
Thank you very much for being here today, sir, for your comments. You referred, we had witnesses before us last week, I guess, from the RCMP who talked about their community outreach program, in particular with young people, and their attempt, I think, to using some crime prevention methods that we've seen successful in Canada, particularly among gangs, to assist young people in finding a different path out. So your suggestion is that you've had no involvement with them as to whether or not their program would help. More importantly, I guess, I think you obviously have heard of the program, though. Can you give your opinion as to whether, if that doesn't work, or if it won't work, what will work when it comes to young people and trying to keep them from becoming engaged in some of the hatred and anger that you're talking about?
Senator, they're laughing at the RCMP behind your backs, these young men. These are highly staged events. These are money-making events. De-radicalization program is a joint venture between companies, consultants, and academics who have a vested interest in this. You cannot produce one de-radicalized person in the last 14 years. Each one of the people who's marketing himself as a former radical is doing so for financial purposes. You show me one person who says that he has been de-radicalized. One former radical from Gitmo who says that jihad is inapplicable. Out of 1,000 Islamists, there will be one jihadist. What we are doing is saying, how do we fight Islamism? The way we fight chickenpox, that we introduced some same germs so they can destroy the other germ? No. This is cancer. You're introducing tumors where tumors already exist. This has become a profit-making venture. For me and many secular liberal colleagues, we know this is a war declared on us. Unfortunately, for many other civil servants and folks, this is a money-making venture. You form a committee, you bring a proposal, you get funded. Millions have been spent, and we cannot defeat men in caves? Trillions. Imagine the amount, hundreds of billions the Americans spent in Iraq and the army ran away, yet not a single American general has been held accountable because it was a total fraud. Nobody dares say that there were billions that were stolen in this enterprise. The Brits and the Canadians have had a very good record in having armed forces that fight with dignity. The private guards and private mercenaries and even Snowden is not a CIA employee. Since when did we fight our enemy by contracting out to private forces? Even the people who vetted Snowden was a private company. You cannot win a war against people who are dedicated to die for no money whatsoever and face them with people who go on tours of duty, a term unheard of in the First or the Second World War. Don't recruit an army saying that get a degree in engineering or an American citizenship by serving a term in Iraq. Those people don't fight wars. They want to come back and run a company. So, what's happening with us is, and this is a rare opportunity for me, because nobody wishes to speak to the ordinary Muslim. 90% of us don't go to a mosque, Senator. 90% of us have no affiliation with any mosque. We are architects, we are cab drivers, we may even be pole dancers, but none of us dress up in that medieval costume that the RCMP and the CSIS have in a racist way imposed on us as our identity. Do you think after 25 years I need to dress like a Saudi to be believed by you that I'm an authentic Muslim? Would you, this is blackface in my face. I am not a joker, I'm a Muslim Canadian. I came here to escape those tyrants, and the RCMP and CSIS are feeding them. I have been to the CCR meetings and I met a member as senior as an assistant minister who was a Muslim, briefing us at the Friday prayers on what story to give to the RCMP officers. A con job of that if I was anyone in the government, I would charge that man for being a traitor to this country. to the place that gave our parents and us a place to be free. I can't speak in Canada, and you bring the people who wanted to kill me and make them as RCMP advisors? We would have lost the Second World War if we had the same leadership in Canada and Britain as we have today in our intelligentsia.
If I may, Mr. Chair, obviously you don't think the program works. That's pretty clear. I'm
Thank you.
asking you the question, then what will work? Because we are having people in this country who are, if not before, now finding themselves in a position of supporting something that involves killing Canadians.
First thing is, we suspend immigration from Iran, Pakistan, Somalia. You cannot have, I can take you to Mississauga Road or the $1 million mansions of Pakistani generals of the ISI, which is not ISIS, by the way, who live here amongst us. You want to know the foreign students over here? The MSA, the Muslim Students Association, designated by the Muslim Brotherhood as their front, is hosting an event in Windsor on the 26th where an RCMP superintendent is sitting down with two Islamists. Would that RCMP come to an event that we would do? Impossible. There's nothing to offer. I have no exotic meals to offer during Ramadan to these hundreds of RCMP and CSIS and Toronto police officers that every Ramadan have a feast day. It's multiculturalism gone mad, senators. And our country is being hurt and nobody is watching the Mounties don't get their man. I can assure you, not today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Bayak.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Fatah, for an excellent presentation. I think all my questions have actually been answered because you have given your views on radicalization. I wondered maybe one thing. For the community members who do speak out, like yourself, are you threatened, alienated, or targeted by radicals in any way? And do you feel that you're in any danger for speaking out like this? And how do you encourage others who are truly moderate to speak as well?
You'll be surprised. I heard the gentleman before me talk about internet security. Do you know I am the person banned on Facebook? Seriously. I am a danger to Facebook. On a social network that hosts ISIS, prostitution gangs, drug gangs, it is me as a Sun columnist whose profile is banned. When I get a death threat, the police investigate me in Toronto, because who comes to investigate me? The head of Toronto Police Intelligence is one of my co-religionists. I don't like to wash my dirty linen in public, Senator, but I've had it. 14 years and Canada and the United States couldn't defeat a bunch of ragtag medieval monsters, and we debated. I wish Justin Trudeau was here. I wish he was here so I could ask him, do you think I deserve to get jihadis? That he would go to a mosque where women are sent to the back of the bus? Senators, you cannot find radicalization if you believe that women deserve to sit at the back of the bus. And every mosque, no, there are two that don't do this. Every mosque I know other than the two send their women to the basements, behind balconies, or in the last row. And the RCMP and the Liberal and Conservative and New Democrat politicians go there, look at that, and never once did they say, I'd like to see a sister in the front row. They dare not, because they'd be accused of being racist.
Senator, do you have a follow-up, Senator Bayak?
No, that's
Senator Dejanay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Fatah, can you hear the voice of the interpreter? Are you hearing the interpreter? Good. I have been listening closely to what you have said, and you talked about the RCMP, but I would like to because the RCMP exists here in Canada at the present time, but in your opinion, what would be the best strategy to make the best outreach strategy for the RCMP so that it could connect with the Muslim community? And in your opinion, what should this community outreach program look like in order to fight against terrorism? But the RCMP is the institution we have to work with at the moment.
I understand the paradigm which says they have to do outreach. I can't understand why it is the RCMP's job to outreach. This is the politician's job to do outreach to the community and engage. The RCMP's job is not to cater to the whims and fancies of people. They are there to solve criminal activity. In this house, I was hearing, some of us listened to the hearings live. I heard either CSIS or RCMP say they do not investigate mosques. And nobody said why. If RCMP has an agreement with the mosque that they will give a 24-hour notice before they enter the mosque, is this a victory of the RCMP? Or those who think that the Friday prayer should start with a prayer asking for the defeat of infidels and a victory of Muslims? We cannot expect our security agencies to do community outreach. They are neither trained nor they are responsible for that. Their job is crime prevention. This is not criminal activity. This is war. This is terror. If we can't call it war and terror and refer to it as criminal activity, we have already lost the war. Hitler didn't create a crime when he invaded Poland. He committed a crime when he killed the Jews. When he invaded Poland and Austria and Denmark and France, he committed war. We're living in a different age when states are not attacking us, but non-state actors are wanting to kill us. And they are recruiting from within us. Not deprived, uneducated kids, but two Quebecois who were sons of the soil came from us and killed our own soldiers. Nobody has asked who converted them to Islam. Not a single person has asked a simple question. What was that contact point? Who is the individual? Not journalist, no politician, no liberal, no conservative, no New Democrat. Nobody dare ask this question, because that would be racist, wouldn't it? And if I had to solve a crime, my first point is, who recruited you into the mafia if it was criminal? Wouldn't that be the first question? This guy killed his own countrymen. And we don't want to know who made him do that?
If I could just follow up on Senator Dagenet's question. And as you know, with our hearings, we are doing our best to have a public conversation in respect to identifying the problem, being able to assess what supports the ideology that obviously is accompanying this type of activity, and thirdly, what can prevent it. And the question, I think, was put by Senator Dagenet to you is in respect to how can governments, the federal and maybe the provincial government, help and assist within those communities, in this case, the Muslim community that you referred to, help those, the vast majority, in respect to being able to counteract this type of extremist ideology that's being perpetuated. Now, you've just said that the RCMP is in a situation where some might say they obviously are working with the individuals involved within the community and can identify the community. At the end of the day, are responsible for enforcing the laws. The question then has to be, if within that community, if it's not the RCMP or other government agencies, who within that organization or within that community would be best suited to be able to work within the community to move it ahead, because you're not going to change this overnight. So if you could do that in a in a manner which gives us kind of a, on the record, what could be
Absolutely. I think a very good way would be for CSIS and the new legislative powers that the government is introducing would be very helpful in that matter. Let me give you the example of the Toronto 18. They were busted by good intelligence work.
That's right.
Right? Nobody is out there doing community outreach or playing basketball. There was a spy, $300,000 was spent, well invested. He brought the courts, brought the convictions. But tell me, who let the guy who was convicted out of this country to go and die in Syria? I'm not the senator or the MP. I'm just saying we have evidence of what works and what doesn't work. We know there are people being injured in Syria, come back, do health treatment away, and then go back. We have people who support the Khidr family, who work with the RCMP, and the RCMP says these are good guys. That's a self-confessed murderer, a terrorist. We need to have our ideas clearer. So the Toronto 18 mechanism works. CSIS should be empowered. This is their job to develop intelligence, and not by working with a community group, but working within it.
Okay. Senator Desjardins.
Yes.
With your permission, Mr. Chair, I have just a rectification. Monsieur Fatah.
Mr. Fatah, we're going to talk about community leaders. How can they work with Canada to prevent radicalization? Let's think of community leaders, and then I would also almost like to add, in order to create trust between between community leaders and Muslim groups.
Senator.
Merci.
Community leaders are leaders of cultural communities, not religious clerics who are paid to show us the moral compass of how to live as good human beings. You go to any Muslim event, it will look different than what your mosque looks like. Go to any wedding with me, and I'll tell you, you won't see the hijabs and the burqas that you see at the mosque. The way to reach with the community leaders is to reach with the cultural communities that sing and dance the way Canadians do. Nobody reaches out to the Nile Foundation, which is an Egyptian group. Nobody has ever reached out to some symphony in Montreal. I can give you a number of cultural groups that meet every year and have fun, dinners, games, children playing. We have focused on Muslims as if the only thing a Muslim does is preach and pray. That's not what we are. We are just like you. We don't like going to the mosque. We go there, we have to sit, we are old, we can't sit on the floor, many of us. We're 65 now. The guy is always boring. He's got the microphone. He's like the 12th century Catholic priest speaking in Latin that I can't understand. 80% of Canada's Muslims don't understand Arabic. 100% of the sermons are in Arabic. For goodness sake, that's not where our community leaders are. I'm not a community leader. I'm just a journalist. But there are. Senator Ataullah Jan is a community leader. She's a senator. She should be the community leader. The RCMP should work with her. There was another Muslim senator. There are members of parliament. They are community leaders. They get elected. MPs, whether they're New Democrats, Liberal or Conservative. They are the leaders. If the imams have to become leaders, let them fight elections and get into parliament. Parliamentarians are leaders. We elect you. We respect you whether we oppose you or not. But don't tell me that I need a 12th century monk from the Sinai to tell me what to do with landing on the comet. This doesn't work. So stop meeting with people of the 12th century, start meeting with people of the 21st.
Monsieur le Président,
Senator Desjardins?
Just a small comment, and if this is some consolation, in the course of 3 months, I went to an Armenian evening, to a Maghreb evening, and to a third evening, and I can tell you I had lots of fun.
merci, on a bien mangé.
Stuart Olson.
Thank you, Chair. I would just ask you too, and what I'm a bit afraid, well, not afraid, but I wonder if in the Muslim community there are people who do speak out. Is there support for them within the Muslim community? Are there support structures that they would dare to come and say so-and-so? I wonder about that, about the responsibility being taken by the community itself, and do they need assistance?
There are huge numbers of Muslims who within their homes are desperate to get rid of the image that we have. My daughter works for the CBC. None of my nieces, it has become so, well, I shouldn't be saying that, this will be recorded, but people want to become Canadians. Don't force us to become something else. Everyone who wants to integrate faces an obstacle. Everyone who wants to go away is funded. There is not a dollar spent by the entire Canadian government that is there to support those Muslims who oppose ISIS. Not one. In 2005, you may be aware of the Sharia debate in Quebec and in Ontario. The death threats that the Quebec Assembly member Fatma Huda Pepin faced, what we endured in that debate. Thank God that the Ontario government had the wisdom and the Quebec National Assembly had a unanimous resolution to reject Sharia. Britain is paying the price for not having Muslims to come out. It wasn't easy for us. What is the two things that happen when a Muslim stands up against the mullahs? He doesn't get a plot to bury himself or his parents in the graveyard. He's never invited to a wedding or a birthday party, which in a marginalized community is social ostracization that destroys the very soul of the first generation immigrant because he's not entertained by anyone. The social pressures are such that they affect you back home. And the very people involved in this moral crime of forcing people not to be Canadian are rewarded by politicians, police, and the intelligentsia. It's a sad story which perhaps my daughter someday will write about, the decades lost when people came to this country to offer, and because they wanted to be Tommy Douglas, they wanted to be the Diefenbakers, they wanted to be even supporters of the PQ, they were told, no, you need to go eat a samosa somewhere and dress up in a bizarre way, the RCMP will come and entertain you. I don't want this outreach. Please stay away, keep away from us. But when somebody issues a death threat and the police comes to my house to investigate me for making a false claim, what does it tell my children? And they send Muslim police officers to my home. Senators, it is a comedy of errors what's happening. But very few will tell you this because nobody wants to wash the dirty linen in public.
Senator Mitchell?
Mr. Fatah, my experience with the Muslim community is so fundamentally different than yours. I just know so many wonderful, remarkable, amazing, beautiful people. Don't say anything. Can I finish, please?
I'm sorry?
And don't say, I thought you were going to say, don't interrupt me. I'm not.
Did I?
Just about. I find that the implication that every single imam in this country is inciting people to violence, which is in a sense what you
No.
said, because the
No.
first prayer,
No, don't put words in my mouth, Senator.
My second
Please.
question. So my first question is: Have you been to every mosque in the country?
I have a
that you
reco-
say is preaching on Friday a prayer that starts a prayer that talks about a battle with
Senator.
non-Muslim people.
I resent the fact that you're teaching me my religion, number one. You would have to live 65 years of my life, in 10 years in Saudi Arabia and 30 years in Pakistan and 25 years here to dare to tell me what is Islam. Number two, I did not say they incite violence. That is words that you are putting in my mouth. You should not do that. You're a senator. You should be the role model not to change my words. Number three, I suggested that every Friday prayer is preceded by a prayer asking for the defeat of the infidel at the hands of the Muslims. And I stand by it, sir. And that prayer is going on for 1400 years. And I didn't say that you did not meet Muslims or that Muslims were not fantastic. I am a Muslim. And I am fantastic. And I am the role model for Muslims in this country. The people that you buy as a liberal senator in creating multiculturalism and sidetracking us away from the challenges that we face, I resent the fact that you implicated me as an Islamophobe, and that is exactly what politicians like you do to silence us.
Colleagues, we're getting to the end of our time. I want to thank Mr. Fatah for coming before us and taking the time and the effort to be before us, put his opinion forward. We will be recessed till 3:30. Thank you.